Hello and welcome to Talk Spooky to Me, the Ghost Story Guys mail show. I'm Brennan Storr.
I'm Paul Bestall.
And this is our opportunity to hear from you, our audience. Paul, my friend, how are you doing?
I'm okay. We're halfway through the week. It's been an interesting week so far. Who knows what the rest of it may bring?
Well, you had quite the weekend. You were telling me on you have a new food establishment in Sheffield. So Friday you had, was it Palestinian, and then Saturday you had Pakistani shawarma?
Yeah, who doesn't say I'm not a man of the people?
Oh man, I am jealous. I had bacon and eggs this morning at a diner. We're not going to tell the rest of the story, but that's what happened.
Yeah, it was very nice. It's good to hang out where the young and beautiful live. And then after Saturday, they built a sort of new adventure playground round the corner. So obviously we found this incredible sort of German metal floor xylophone type thing.
Okay.
So it's essentially like 16 squares on the floor, and you jump on them and you go ding, 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 ding. So you can basically just dance about like an idiot and make a tune of sorts. So we did that for 10 minutes.
It's like the piano from Big, except it conjures Krampus.
Yeah. Yeah. So we did that, and then we walked round to another pub that's just reopened and gone back to its old name that it hasn't had for 30 years, which was confusing, but we got there, where I was not accosted, but basically a group of very drunk men who I presume like sport and South American imports, shall I say.
I see.
Basically came over to me and went, and just handed a camera to me and kept his phone. So I said, "Oh, do you want me to take a picture?" And he went, yeah. So I did that, and I went, "Right, all right, lads." And they all went, like, "Oh, best photo anybody had taken us to do. Oh, it's brilliant, thanks, mate." Oh. And then I sat back down, and then we finished the drinks and went. And they all went, "There he goes, there he goes. What a lad, what a lad." And then we walked around the corner somewhere else. And then, had a couple somewhere else and then came home. It was a lovely, lovely evening. Yeah, nice weekend.
Paul Bestall, folk hero. This is the news I want to hear. My weekend was quiet. I had my friends who I helped move last month. They are now settled in their new place. They had me over for a lovely barbecue. It was a perfect way to say goodbye to summer. Sitting on their new balcony, having a barbecue, having some drinks, and watching the world go by.
Oh, you can't beat a barbecue in the last throes of summer. So it makes it a bit more special, I think.
I agree. And speaking of special, we have very special guests on this episode. We have Michelle River, owner of Erie River Publishing. Authors Steve Stredd, C.M. Forrest, and Andrew Piper are all here to talk to us about the upcoming DreadCon in Kitchener-Waterloo on September 14th. I am really excited for this conversation, Paul. These guys are... Andrew is an established Canadian horror author. He's an internationally known best-selling horror author at this point. And Steve and CM are upcoming horror authors, both well-respected and very young and really just doing great stuff. And it is very cool to have people like that on the show. Absolutely.
Nightmares aplenty guaranteed, I suggest.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah, I've read some of Steve's books. I know Christian CM, his book is Infested, and I just can't bring myself to read it. Not because he's not a cool guy and a talented author, because he is both those things, but insect shit, can't do it.
I was having a chat with the spider in the shower earlier.
You know, I'm reading John Dies at the End by Jason Pargin right now,
yes.
And that just sounds like a sentence that could have come from it, and so I'm very confused.
Well, I was just having a shower and this spider appeared, and I was like, "You're right there, stay there. I'm coming over here, you don't want to get wet, stay where you are." And it just stopped there and just kind of stayed looking at me.
Well, as long as it didn't talk back.
Well, I wouldn't mind. I'm a big fan of spiders. So Julie's always like, "Ah!" And I'm like, well, I'll just talk to it when I have a shower, you know? Very differing opinions of spiders in our house.
Well, we take a minute to reset the rules of reality. We are going to head right over to our conversation with Michelle River, Steve Stredd, Andrew Piper, and C.M. Forrest. Welcome back. As promised before the break, we are joined by Michelle River, owner of Erie River Publishing and organizer of DreadCon, sponsored by Rue Morgue, coming Saturday, September 14th at Federation Hall in Waterloo, Ontario. It is a Herculean undertaking for which I am very, very excited. And she will be joined by our other guests, among many other authors. Today we are joined by Andrew Piper, Steve Stredd, and C.M. Forrest. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ghost Story Guys.
Hello.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
We're doing a whole Brady Bunch thing here, so don't worry about if you talk over one another. Don't worry about it. I will fix it in post. I promise. That's fine. So, guys, again, congratulations on DreadCon coming together. This is, as I said, it's a big undertaking. I was kidding, but not really. This is not an easy thing, and it is so very cool to see a celebration of Canadian horror authors.
Absolutely, it's been a blast being able to put this together and just getting to know so many different horror authors and publishers and dark fiction creators. It's been amazing.
And so, again, coming up on September 14th, I wonder if, Michelle, if you could tell us a little bit about what folks can expect at DreadCon. And of course, that is going to be at Federation Hall in Waterloo, Ontario.
Yeah, so it's in the University of Waterloo complex. It's one of the main buildings, which is really exciting because we get to hopefully tap into the student kind of population. We're really trying to build essentially a dark literature convention where we've got everything that you would see at a huge convention, but scaled down so it's a little bit more accessible to everybody. So we're having a big book fair and market where we have over 50 authors, publishers, and horror spooky creators. And then during the hours, because the hours go from 11 to 7, on Saturday, the 14th, we're also going to be having panels throughout the day. So we have panels. We're going to have reading sessions for indie authors so that they can read from their upcoming books or previously published books. We're also doing some panels with actually some of the authors shown right here. So we're going to have panels with different authors throughout. And we also have a launch party, which is going to be happening, I think it's at 1:15.
It is at a time.
Yeah, if we're doing a launch party, which is the first time we've ever done a real launch party for Erie River Publishing, where there's going to be like coffee and tea and actual like little snacks to eat. And we have seating for about 50 people. So we're going to do a big celebration for his book release. And then we didn't want to forget the authors either. So a lot of the vendors were invited to do a pitch session to 3 different publishing houses. So we also have a pitch session that's been planned for everyone that was interested.
That is very cool. Well, Christian, that seems like a great place to start. The launch party, of course, for your new short story collection, The Roots Run Deep and Other Stories. Is this your first release since Infested in 2022?
Yeah, actually it is. So I've had a lot of short stories published, just like individual stories published in various anthologies and things. But it is my first like book with my name on it, just my name on it, and since Infested. Like both my previous 2 books just happened to come out within a month of each other, which, you know, I mean, that's just how it happened. It would have been nice if it was like a year apart, but right. They came out so close together and then I had nothing. So I'm really excited for the launch, though, because these like collection like this, I mean, these stories kind of, for this book specifically, it's like this, these stories range from like a really like a wide period of like my writing career, not necessarily like in years. It's only about 4 or 5 years worth of stories in this book. But the first couple of stories were when I couldn't get published to save my life, and, you know, and nobody wanted anything. And then it's, you know, all the way up to being invited or you know, having requests to write short stories for collections. And they're all kind of collected in this book. So it's a nice like slice of my whole writing career is kind of all right in this one book.
Would you consider there's like an overarching theme running through it? I mean, the title is very folk horror.
No, but I did realize as reading it and trying to put them in order that like sometimes there's certain like go-tos that I go to a lot and was like, oh no, you know, just where I'll be like, oh man, like I clearly hate kids or something, you know what I mean? Because like something awful happens to like a kid or something in every story. And I'm like, well, that wasn't intentional, but I guess like child hating is a theme, you know, stuff like that, where I was all of a sudden like, geez, I don't want to put too many back to back or else people are going to think I got something going on.
No, there's a blurb. This guy hates kids.
Yeah. I mean, come on. We all do. It's fine.
Like, in fairness, you're a father and we're not allowed to murder our own children. So like we have to get an outlet somewhere.
Yeah. They're all stand-ins for my kids, basically. But no, there is like a lot of, I would say, folk and cosmic horror. That's the other thing I didn't realize, that I go to the cosmic horror, like I dip my foot into that pool quite a bit, and I don't really, wasn't intentional. It just sort of, I just kind of what I like, and I tend to go there a lot. So it's kind of I would say an even mix of folk and cosmic, but again, totally unintentional. Just kind of the stuff I like, and it's what I gravitate towards. And when I had a bunch of stories together, they all just kind of fell into those genres for the most part.
Right. Well, it's funny you mentioned the kid thing, because I was watching Alien versus Predator 2 the other day, and I hadn't seen it in years. And there is a scene fairly early on where the alien, the facehugger, goes for a small kid. And I remember thinking, boy, they are not messing around. It's almost like an indication of, the horror is they are not going to be pulling punches when something like that happens.
Well, I mean, I think it's one of those things that, like, traditionally it's like animals and kids were safe. So I think, like, when you brutally murder a child within the first 10 minutes, it's like saying, hey, anything can happen now. You don't even know. It's going to get wild.
Yeah, if you're going to get your money back from the box office, now's the time. Go.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, they're letting you know.
On the subject of books coming out, Andrew, your first, I believe it's your first novel under the pseudonym Mason Coyle, William, is coming out soon.
That's right. Just, next week.
That is exciting. I mean, I'm always excited for more work from you, but the sci-fi tack seems new for you, and well, not new, I guess. Homecoming had some strong sci-fi elements, but is this sort of your first really kind of going hard in that direction?
Yeah, it is, and I think the Mason Coyle invention of this sort of second personality was the result less of sort of like, what, I'm going to go hard into sci-fi horror, and this is a conscious decision to do that. It was more just like, I won't get into it because William has sort of a longish history before it became the novel that it is. It was initially kind of a very, very super briefly, it was a short story that with the same kind of characters and setup that I wrote to try to entice filmmakers to make a movie. And I was successful in that. And a producer at Ridley Scott's company, Scott Free, and I worked on a script for a long time. We did get a director, but we couldn't get a lead to kind of bring the real money. And so that went on for a while, and it came to an end, and we kind of parted ways, and I still loved the story. And so I took the time to kind of expand it into a novel, gave it to my agent. My agent is like, I really like this, but it's so short and tight, and it happens almost like in real time, and it feels like something new here. And he asked me, like, what are you thinking about next? And I told him, and it was like, okay, well, wait a minute. This feels like, 2 is a trend. So, what about doing this under a pseudonym, having, kind of dividing into whatever I've been doing erratically before as myself. And then there's this Mason Coyle guy who's just terrified of technology, as I am, and is just kind of writing out his worst nightmares about technology in these kind of tight, sort of like grounded little human stories. And so that's where it all came from. That's where Mason Coyle came from. He wasn't my invention. He was my agent's.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. I mean, it feels like such a perfectly timed story, given everything that's happening with, I mean, I don't think much of generative AI, but just with, that is something that is very deep in people's brains. And, the notion of what kind of technology has in store for us is not an encouraging thought. So it just seems like it couldn't be coming out at a better time. I
think so. I hope so. It's certainly, I'm very worried about it. So I don't think I'm alone. and I'm excited. I hope to that the book, in addition to whatever else it might or might not do in the world, that it kind of inspires a conversation about not, that our major worries about AI, the Terminator, whatever, like, oh, what if AI gets together and controls all the computers and fires off all the missiles, or, those kind of more conventional, still terrifying, but kind of more conventional fears. I wanted to kind of explore the spiritual aspects of AI, because if AI is independent consciousness and therefore can create itself self-identify, create stories, lie. What's to differentiate it from us at the moment of death? Where, in other words, what does AI become when it dies? Does AI have a soul? And if so, how is its cosmology, its understanding of good and evil, angels, demons, how, if at all, is it different from ours, or how might it be? And so that was really the exciting part. It's like, oh, here's a whole new worry we all have. It's like, what if AI decides that, like, oh, we're demons? And it's like, oh, okay, well, that's great. I had 14 concerns before. Now that makes 15.
Well, I think that's one of the aspects of some of the greatest sci-fi novels that have been written in the last 120 years. There's always this kind of double-sided coin to technological advances, be it the works of H.G. Wells and some of the work that came out in the 50s, like Who Goes There and things like that, as you've developed, and some of the work that Arthur C. Clarke did in the 60s and 70s, and obviously probably the most famous overriding consciousness that we're aware of in that particular period would be Hal from A Space Odyssey, because he decides that he knows what's best for everybody. And yet we're talking how technology has advanced incredibly fast over the last sort of 10 years, even in our time. And here we all are having this conversation, which 15 years ago would have been probably a concept for a great book as well. And now it seems it's the norm. And it's amazing sometimes how quickly we adapt to these alien concepts that if we'd have talked about these in the 80s and 90s, people would have thought we were mad.
And we have no one but ourselves to blame for all of this, of course.
Yeah, that is true. It would be comforting to put it off on some external influence, but no, we just keep screwing it up over and over.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah. A while back I was watching the Friday. I was rewatching the Friday the 13th series, and there is a time jump between I want to say between like 4 and 6. It's basically, I think it's meant to be about 10 years between the two, but of course they were actually only released about 2 or 3 years apart. And it's funny because their vision of 10 years, so in the 90s, in the 80s, was just the 80s again, but 10 years later. Nothing, stylistically, everything looked exactly the same. The technology was exactly the same. And sometimes I kind of wish that's the way it had gone. Just keep doing the 80s. It wasn't great.
Just keep doing the 80s. Everyone get your goat.
Keep doing the 80s.
Let's do this.
Yeah, there was no TikTok, at least.
Yeah.
I didn't have to worry about my brand. It was,
It's very true. But then people probably wouldn't find us. And there would be no concept of indie author or the change in
that is
indie
true.
Horror that we have been seeing.
And Steve, we have neglected you so far. Of course, you have just released When I Look at the Sky, All I See Are Stars. And I am about halfway through it. It is another great book from you, so that no great surprise there.
Yeah, it's been a nightmare to have that one come out, so it's nice when people are reading it.
Yes, I was aware of. We won't. I mean, we can talk about it if you want, but we don't have to. Okay, yeah, yeah. I was aware of the struggle.
It's a good warning for people who are going the small press route a little bit. I mean, not. I know Michelle does small press stuff, so I'm not being mean towards all of them. But it was definitely an interesting experience. But I know I'm far from the only one that's ever happened to. So. I'm so happy that it's out, and the folks who have been reading it so far have either been loving it or absolutely hating it. And that's kind of the result that you expect with a book kind of written like this. So I never expected anything in the middle. I thought people are either going to be raving about it or just crapping all over it. And that's pretty much the two responses. So it's been exactly how I expected it, which is
right on target. Exactly what you were looking for.
Yeah. Either it's a 5-star or a 1-star, and that's exactly what I thought when even back when I had pitched it with Andrew from formerly of Darklit, not Andrew Piper, but because I have probably 300 pages of notes from my time researching this stuff, and I had this kind of fully formed idea for it, and I said, hey, like, you're looking for something from me, I have this, but be aware, if you put it on NetGalley, it's probably not going to be very positively responded to from those folks on there. And that's exactly what happened with it. So I think when it finally finished NetGalley, I think we're at like a 2.3 or 2.5 out of 5 rating average on there. And I was like, that's pretty much spot on, either 1 star or 5 star. So
if you don't mind, Steve, I'm kind of curious to know what the genesis of the idea behind When I Look at the Sky was.
So for those who are unaware, it's based off of some of the research I did when I had been a kind of pseudo de facto member of an online cult for a number of years leading up to COVID. And this was just more of the observational craziness that these people were going through as they kind of looked for, you know, something to hang on to, and kind of that big pie in the sky they were looking for immortality, and, you know, wanting to latch on to a god that may or may not have existed. And yeah, it's just one of those crazy bonkers moments. And every single moment that happened in there was something that was an observation. So even now when I see people talking about some certain moments, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember when that popped up on some of the stuff. So
among the criticism, are you seeing people saying things like, well, that just doesn't seem very realistic, to things that you know for a fact are things people have said?
I don't look at a lot of it. I mean, I just see the average and I just assume kind of it. David Sodergren, who did the initial editing and then the copy editing of it, he went down a deep hole to see kind of what some of the criticisms were. And most of it's more the, not so much they don't think it's happened. It's more that they're like, well, is this just extreme for extreme? And to me, when I see that in this particular book, I know they're not fully reading it, because there's a complete story that goes through it. And so far, nobody has really come out and said that they've followed it. So I'm happy with that bit of mystery.
I'm surprised, Steve, because I'm very interested in cults. I just find them baffling. But also, yeah, I can also understand why some people congregate to them. And I think you only have to look at some of the notable ones and some of the incidents that have gone on throughout the last few decades, that you only have to look at, say, Heaven's Gate, where Marshall Applewhite convinced several male members of the Gulf to fly to Mexico to have their genitals removed because he wanted everybody to be sexless. And this is something that happened 30 years ago. And you look at some of the other aspects that have gone on. The Nexum one that happened fairly recently, and you look at that and you're talking about famous, rich celebrities who are successful signing up for a cult where they get branded with the initials of another actress and the leader to prove that they're sexually observant towards him and his wishes. And then I'm often amazed that people don't think that these things go on, because there's nothing off the table in these situations often.
I think the weird thing is that so many people look at cults of being so extreme, yet what is it like? I mean, how many people in the US are members of MAGA? Right? I mean, that's potentially the largest cult in the world right now, but they won't consider it a cult because it's a political party, and, you know, they don't want to be considered crazy. But I mean, they've made Trump their Jesus, not to get political on your show here, you guys. But so, I mean,
I don't think there's anyone listening who likes the guy. So
you know, when people are like, I can't imagine ever being a member of a cult, and then 2 seconds later, they throw up a Donald Trump meme on Facebook defending him, and he's like an AI version of Jesus. I mean, it's almost the same as, like, you know, look at Apple products. You know, the people who line up for Apple products, it's almost a cult, right? There's something we all fall borderline on the edge of being in a cult, whether we realize it or not, because we are following something. And to a degree, there's folks who would argue that in some cases that's the same thing with some authors, where, you know, it's like, you know, this is the best author ever. And you know, this is the only author you can read. And if you don't like their stuff, then like you're an idiot. So there's stuff where it's people are always so close to tumbling over that edge of blind devotion and following something, whether or not they fully believe in it or not, that when you read cult stuff, I think that's partly why it can be really unnerving, because you're like, well, I remember when I had, you know, I don't know, I never did, but I had all the Jason Priestley posters on my wall because 90210 is the biggest thing ever. You know, it's that sense of they think they can connect with it, so they go that extra distance. And for some people, again, the cult aspect can be a singular thing where they become a stalker of a celebrity, and they go over that deep end, and away they go, right? So yeah, for me, cult stuff, it freaks me out because it's so easy for somebody just to suddenly be like, oh, like you're in a cult.
Yeah. And I don't think situations like that often you can accuse people of lacking intelligence or anything, but as we said, you only have to look at any major cult in the last 100 years, and it pulls people from all walks of life. And that's the thing I think people often overlook as well. They just presume that these people must be stupid, Steve, to fall for such things. And yet we've seen it time and time and time again. Very intelligent, savvy people buy into it wholeheartedly because it's what, deep down, it's what they want to believe. And therefore, they're being told what they really believe, and everything else around it's irrelevant. Doesn't matter whether it's a band, a politician, a concept, a belief of certain behaviors. You go all in, as you say, and like even having posters on your wall, you are essentially building a shrine to somebody you'll never meet. But
it's the same. Like even you mentioned, like musicians, like which one of us didn't like want their hair cut a specific way in teenage years, or want to wear makeup a specific way, or now you're wearing clothing specifically because a band wore the clothes like that. I mean, that's an early indication of you're almost in a cult, and then you see all of the grooming stuff that happens from that. And again, that's no different than if you're a 13-year-old who falls in love with a lead singer versus a 70-year-old guy who falls in love with the main politician or whatever, right? Like it's really easy to go over that step real quick.
And that's kind of puts you guys in a really fascinating position because of your public profile. Each of you, of course, you're published authors now. You're out there in the world. As you say, like Steve, you don't necessarily spend a lot of time looking at the criticism, which I think is a good thing, but it sort of puts you in the crosshairs. And I know, Michelle, you are going to be having a panel at DreadCon that sort of a little bit kind of addresses this. You're going to be having Nick Cutter there to talk about writing under a pseudonym.
Yeah. Steve is actually going to be moderating that. Andrew's on it as well. So it is kind of, it's funny that he's talking about authors and cults and things like that. But I really do feel like there is, although potentially a fine line, I feel like the difference between idolizing someone or appreciating someone's craft versus becoming a cult because you follow them is totally different, because there isn't an intention to hurt or to put someone out. So like, not that we need to have a discussion about cults versus not cults right now, but I really do think that the difference between a cult and someone's fandom could be different. But again, I do feel that there could be a fine line between it.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, hopefully no one's sacrificing anyone over Marvel movies, no. But I wouldn't be surprised either.
Well,
yeah, that's fair, Paul. That's fair. I saw some of the criticism for the Marvels, which was undeserved, by the way. That was a great movie.
I found them all. It's all right.
Okay.
But I think horror's, whether it's cinematic or it's written, I think for me, I'm one of those believers. I think it always shines a light on the darkest parts of life that nobody else wants to talk about.
Yeah, it gives us, I feel like it gives a lot of people an outlet to talk about the things. It gives us an outlet to talk about child death, talk about things that are hard to, even as a creator, if someone's gone through traumatic experiences, it's a way for some to, be cathartic, get it out there, relive their trauma in a way that is in a safe environment. A lot of times, I know for a lot of female authors, it's a way to shine light on things that are normally or have been really taboo to talk about, like miscarriages, sexual assault, things that like we don't normally have a conversation about, and maybe like we can talk about it because it's in a book.
And that stuff can be very empowering.
Absolutely.
Because for some people, that's even the author, that can be their therapy. Yeah. And for a lot of people, and I see it, I'm one of the few who does interact all the time on Twitter. And I see it a lot on there where they will say, I've always been shamed by my family or friends to go to therapy. And I never was able to feel right about a situation until I wrote and published a book about it. So for some people, that's just, a massive empowering moment for them to be able to do that.
Yep.
For me, I think it's something that's vitally important because for me, some of the greatest horror authors are the people that have always focused on subjects that just weren't acceptable, as we've said, and we're being lighthearted about it. But Stephen King, for example, and obviously Britain, in my opinion, Britain's greatest horror author, the sadly missed James Herbert, were two that were really sort of groundbreaking, because when they were writing their horror films, and their horror books, and adapting some of these wonderful stories that they created, it seemed that nothing was off the table. I mean, I find it incredible when you look at Carrie, really, and look at how old that story really is. And yet here we are. It still resonates in the modern era because it's still dealing with challenges. And it's the kind of book that, as someone that read it many years ago, I still find it hard to get my head around that a man wrote that book.
I always bring up Carrie when I talk about Stephen King, or just even about modern publishing compared to how publishing was. Because if Stephen King showed up today and walked into some sort of publishing house and said, "I got an idea for a book. It's about a teenage girl who gets her period," they would be like, "There's the door, fella. Get out of here." And it would never get published, not by him, And so it's kind of interesting because you have that. Someone like Stephen King couldn't arrive today with a book like Carrie. It just wouldn't fly being written by someone like Stephen King. So it changes a lot. Like when you look back, though, you're right back, and there was really no limits. And it's not a thing of like, I do think certain stories should be told by certain people, that the voices involved in this story should be representing there should be the right voices. But it's just that wasn't even a consideration back in the 70s. So, you would get anything you could think of about any subject matter, any topic. Nothing was off the table, like you said.
For me, it's part of the reason what we're talking about now. It's interesting. I hadn't thought of it this way, but it's part of the reason why I think that evaluating horror according to how scary a book is, as obvious as that might seem, right? Like, look, it's a horror book. Was it scary? It's not the best way to evaluate horror, in my view, because we approach our fear, just as we've been talking about, very, very personally, very, very idiosyncratically. And that's why I think horror is actually kind of more akin to the erotic in many ways. Like what excites us, what informs our desire is very personal and often not even known to ourselves until maybe a very late stage of our lives, if at all. And so the same goes for what frightens us, what disturbs us, where our anxieties lie. And I think for me, that's one of the great things about perhaps less writing horror, but reading horror is, sort of finding out what troubles me and seeing that as a key, one part of a master key to who the hell I am. And I think horror does that in ways that literary fiction or realistic fiction don't do.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because for me, the scariness of a lot of books is that, again, that personal connection. And as you guys may be aware of this, but I'm a fan of Andrew's work. And I think the scariest book he's written is The Trade Mission. And for me, that book terrifies the crap out of me because it's about these people who, have to survive against all odds in the Amazon. And growing up, the Amazon petrified me. I mean, growing up, the woods scared me because the woods are right there. But to go to the Amazon and there's all these hidden indigenous tribes and there's all these animals and there's these bugs and stuff in the water. And, it's just terrifying. And so like the first time I read The Trade Mission, I was like, oh, this is a pretty straightforward book. It's, it's about these frat boys who make it big and they go to Brazil and there's this woman. And then it's like 20 pages later, they're literally, kidnapped and trapped in the Amazon. And that's just, to me, that is more frightening, although getting closer to the William AI stuff is, that's pushing it. But that is way more frightening to me than, some of the haunted house stuff you'll read, because a haunted house story that to me, that seems almost realistic versus getting lost in the Amazon. I'm going to do everything in my power not to ever let that happen.
I love that you are from Alberta and terrified of the Amazon. That's the funniest thing
I'm not
to me.
from Alberta. I live in Alberta.
Sorry, you live in
I'm from British Columbia. Don't put me in that whole Alberta weird group of people.
I think it's fascinating as well with horror is that often people will say, oh, it's you've got tropes and you've got the standard setups. But I think the one thing that is very remarkable about it is we can talk about certain fears or creatures or the fear of ghosts or whatever, and people think, oh, well, it's all been done before, and then somebody will just come out of nowhere and just have a completely different take on what some people might think is a tarnished aspect of it, and it breathes new life into it. And you can see this time and time again, that here we are. I mean, probably modern horror has been around for 200 years, really, probably since Mary Shelley released the modern Prometheus in 1821, 19, something like that. And so it's fascinating that even now you still have new people who attack standard situations and characters and creatures and feelings that people have when caught in such situation, and completely make them seem fresh, as though it's the first time anybody's written about these particular subjects. And it still happens time and time again, doesn't it?
It's always the same basic story, right? But you have this new voice that just kind of comes at it from just a slightly different direction. Like a really good example, I think, and I was having this conversation with somebody, we were talking about possession movies and, like The Exorcist and stuff. And it was like The Exorcist was, the last time it felt like anybody did anything new, and everything since then has just felt like The Exorcist. But then recently we had Talk to Me and Where Evil Lurks, and they were both incredible new takes on possession.
Yeah,
I'd never seen before. And I was like, wow, this is brilliant. And it's just new ideas, but the same old story, but just with new voice and new idea attached to it. It's this great new thing that we've never seen before.
Yeah, Talk to Me, especially because it was a debut film. That's a remarkable achievement. And to come from Australia as well, which is, as we're celebrating Canadian horror, another overlooked market, because two of my favourite horror films of all time, Razorback and Boar, are both very, both about giant pigs running amok in the Australian outback. But they're fabulous films. And Talk to Me, like you say, I was exactly the same, Christian. It's someone that adores The Exorcist and completely disregards near enough every other possession film. Talk to Me just blew me away because I wasn't expecting it to be anywhere near that good.
And you mentioned Frankenstein, Paul. I just want to throw in a mention as well for the filmmaker Bomani Story, their adaptation, The Angry Black Girl and Her Monster.
Yes.
It came out last year. It's just an incredible take on the Frankenstein legend that explores it through a completely different lens. And actually, as we're heading towards the landing here, Andrew, I just wanted to say I was in a reading group with Steve. We did The Homecoming. I think it was last year. There's something that really stuck with me about that book in a way that it talking about taking elements and kind of grafting them onto horror. The way that book was set against a backdrop of civil unrest has stuck with me, I think, just as much, if not more so than the horror. Because it really felt like no matter how it ends, it's really not safe. And I was reminded of it earlier this year when I went to go see Civil War, and Homecoming just kept coming back to me. It had that same sense of an instability underpinning everything. And again, I think that's a difficult thing to do with horror, because you kind of have to deftly weave that in there. And it was just such a great book in its ability to do that.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I love it when I get that same feeling you've just described from a movie or a book as well. That idea of, okay, we've got the action here within this house, cabin, tunnel, car, and there's something's also on a larger scale going on. It may be political, or it may be supernatural in some way, but I love that kind of, and the story doesn't go too deep into that. It just kind of suggests that all is not well. Shirley Jackson does that with her books so well, that there's the idea of, whether it's Hill House or, there's always this idea that the community is ill, or, the society is ill, or if you just go down, there's no relief if you go down the road a couple miles. It's just as bad there.
Well, thankfully, we have relief in places like DreadCon, sponsored by Rue Morgue, coming up on September 14th at Federation Hall in Waterloo, from 11 to 7 p.m. It has been fantastic having you guys here. I wish we had twice as much time to chat, because each of you have so many different things I would love to talk about. But folks, if you are in the Kitchener area or, in a drivable distance, you can meet all these fine folks if you head to DreadCon. And Michelle, is there anything you wanted to add? Anything people should know heading into the convention?
Biggest thing is we are really excited to have this happening. If you are a student, university, college, if you're a kid, you get in for free. Adults are $5. And we've gone ahead and paid for the parking in parking lot R, which is just across the parking lot. It's just across the street kind of thing for it, because university parking is notoriously expensive. So we paid for the parking there and just said it's going to be a really great event. We're hoping to be able to do this every year. We're going to have panels with Andrew's on a panel, Christian's on a panel, Steve's on a panel. It's going to be great.
Very cool. So everyone, let's give folks your pluggables. Tell them where they can find you online, and we will hopefully see them at DreadCon. We'll start with Michelle. Where can folks find you online?
Okay, well, you can find DreadCon at dreadconcan.com. We're also on DreadCon on Facebook. My publishing house, because I also own Erie River Publishing, who published Christian's amazing novel and upcoming collection. That's Erie River, and it's at Erie River everywhere. So TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. No, not Instagram. Instagram is Erie_River because they're a pain in my butt. But Facebook is at Erie River. So you can just, you find us there, and we're erieriverpublishing.com if you want to check us out online.
Fantastic. Andrew, where can folks find you?
I usually just direct people to my website. Not that it's a particularly good one, but it's got all the, here's books, here's articles, here's social media. So it's andrewpiper.com.
All right. And folks, as a big fan of old time radio, I really want to encourage you to check out Andrew's Oracle series on Audible. The second edition, especially, again, I grew up listening to Golden Age of Radio Theater. That was just very, very near and dear to my heart. I love that series.
Oh, terrific.
So
Thanks.
check it out. And Christian, where can folks find you?
So, I mean, I'm all over social media, and the curse of taking on a pen name after you've already started to establish yourself as a writer is that everything is under Christian Lafayette, nothing is under CM Forrest. So, right. If you go to my website, which is just christianlafayette.com, there's links to pretty much everything. But I mean, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, Instagram. I mean, I even make TikToks. I'm like a total youngster. I don't do any dances though. There's no dances, so don't worry. You don't have to see that. But
disappointing.
Yeah, you can find me.
All right. And Steve are you still there, Steve? Or are you on the move?
Yeah, I'm still there.
And where can folks find you online?
You can head to my website at stevestradauthor.ca, or much like Christian, I'm all over every social media. But I also post TikToks. I'm pretty sure there's been a couple dances. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, just search Steve Strad and something ridiculous will come up.
All right. Well, again, folks, that is DreadCon, sponsored by Rue Morgue Magazine, coming up on September 14th at Federation Hall in Waterloo, Ontario, from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Make sure to check it out. I will not be there, so you're going to have to go for me. I have to be on the West Coast. Very disappointed. So you guys go for me. Tell these folks how great they are, and enjoy yourselves. Michelle, Christian, Steve, Andrew, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
It was a blast.
And make sure next time have a TikTok dance off with Christian and Steve.
I'm always game.
Welcome back. Thanks again to Michelle River, Andrew Piper, CM Forrest, and Steve Strad for hanging out with us. Again, don't forget to check out DreadCon, sponsored by Rue Morgue Magazine, Saturday, September 14th at Federation Hall in Waterloo, Ontario, from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Free parking, Paul. That is no small thing here in Canada.
That's worth it on its own, is it not?
It really is. As someone who's driving again recently, I am always appreciative of people paying for my parking. All right, my friend, where can everyone find you online? You
can find Mysteries and Monsters across all social media platforms and any decent or not so decent podcast site.
Fantastic. I'm Largely the Truth on Threads, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Letterboxd. You can find my horror movie show, Weird Together, everywhere fine podcasts live. And before we go, of course, we like to have a musical guest to round out Talk Spooky. This time around, we are welcoming a returning guest. He was actually someone who was on the show, or his music was on the show back in, I think, our very first year, Shadows of the Golden State. That is Oceanography. And Oceanography is a project of singer-songwriter Brian Kelly. And we are playing Brian on the show because Brian is going out on tour over in the West Coast. And folks, if you are on the West Coast, I encourage you to check out his website at oceanographymusic.com. And just like everyone else on the show, we will put links in the show notes so you can check out where Brian is playing. But I will say, on the night the show comes out, he is at the Bistro in Hayward, California. September 11th, he will be at Public House in Springfield, Oregon. September 12th, he will be at the Axe and Fiddle Public House in Cottage Grove, Oregon. And September 13th, he'll be at Marcy's Bar and Lounge in Walla Walla, Washington. And again, he is on tour for all of September and into October, actually. So pardon me, all of September and October. And you'll find a link in the show notes to the full schedule. Brian and I had a conversation a few years back. I interviewed him on Largely the Truth. I really, really love his stuff. And we played his song Painted Powder Blue when we had him on Shadows of the Golden State. This time around, we're going to be sharing the song Monterey. Monterey is the leadoff single from his last album, 13 Songs About Driving Nowhere, in alphabetical order. And it is a beautiful, heartbreaking song, which was a tribute to his sister Corey. And I will tell you, if you want to shed a tear, I will put a link in the show notes as well to the music video for this song. Brian made it himself. It is a video collage detailing Michelle's life as told through family photos. It is heartbreaking. I'm getting chills just talking about it now. Really beautiful stuff. Again, that'll all be in the show notes along with contact details for our guests tonight and where you can find Brian's shows over the next couple months. Thanks as always for listening, folks. We could not do this without you. We appreciate it deeply, and we'll be back next week with episode 197. But until then, we will leave you with Oceanography.